How does it begin, Truman?
I don't know. How does it? Oh, sorry, that's from the film, is it? Yeah.
Hello, you are listening to Off Radar, It's a Movie podcast. I'm James Smith, a professional film and video editor.
I'm James Eatock, a freelance writer and illustrator specialising in 1980s cartoons.
And I'm Neil Brock, aka Nige, the man with two names, former film journalist and currently working in the games industry.
Each week, one of us picks a movie that all three of us either haven't seen in many years or in some cases haven't seen at all.
We each watch the chosen movie, return to the microphone and let you all know exactly what we thought of it.
I'd never really had any interest in watching it and I was proved absolutely right.
I think it's amazing. I really, really love this film.
The film's still a pile of steaming dog shit.
If you fancy joining in and suggesting a movie for us to watch, why not tweet us at Off Radar Podcast
or email us on offradarpod@gmail.com.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, share, and by all means, leave a review.
For now, strap in, turn the volume up, and let's go Off Radar. I just need a really quick wee-wee, then we'll crack on.
I need to do a wee-wee, yeah.
I did my wee-wee.
Go.
Hello. Welcome back to Off Radar. That's where we are today. We're Off Radar. I'm James Smith. I'm joined by James Eatock.
Hello.
And Neil Brock.
Hello.
Who we call Nige. Yeah, back for another episode. This week we are talking about a film that Ross Gould, who
the camel
previously recommended The Others, has
cheers, Ross.
which two in quick succession, I would say.
They're quite quick, aren't they? The Truman Show, which came out in 1998. I guess first question, had we seen this before we done it for the podcast?
Yes, many years ago. I think, to be honest, the first time I saw it might have even been on TV, but it was probably like VHS style, like classic noughties. I probably had some like big jeans and like there was a new metal poster somewhere or some bollocks. I didn't really like new metal that much, but anyway, yeah, it was that kind of era, wasn't it? And again, it was sort of Jim Carrey, wasn't it? He was one of the actors of that generation where everyone was like, oh, what's Jim Carrey doing? And yeah, a slight swerve from what he'd been doing previously with this.
And just a note on that, we have done a Jim Carrey podcast. If you want to go and hear us talk about Jim Carrey in general, then go back and have a listen to that. Little callback. Hey, Eatock, had you seen this film before?
Yeah, it's got Matthew McConaughey in it, Woody Harrelson.
A TV shout out already. That did not take long.
I got there straight away.
I Off Radar bingo.
Yeah, I thought like, well, who's going to mention it first? I thought I'm going to get straight in there. Yeah, I didn't watch Truman until I remember. Like, I was big into film when it came out. Like, I was working at the civil service. I remember it was like heavily in every Empire magazine I was buying and every publication we had at the civil service. Like, because I worked in the films department, we would get all the Variety and all this, and Truman like featured a lot. And I thought, I should see this at some point. And then other films happened, I never did. And then I think the first time I saw it was probably like mid-noughties. So I reckon around about 2004 or 5, something like that. And yeah, I've probably seen it 2 or 3 times since. Oh, spoiler.
Yeah, I think I've seen it a number of times. I can't really recall when I first watched it, but yeah, probably early noughties, I guess. Where like as soon as it was available on like maybe VHS so I definitely had it on VHS. I remember that. Really?
That's I like that.
Yeah. So whenever it came out on VHS, I bought it.
Was it in widescreen on VHS?
Oh God, I probably didn't have a widescreen TV.
VHS. Mention like Laserdisc. Come on, let's go to all the other formats.
Betamax.
VHS. Oh.
We do mention VHS a lot, but it was quite a popular format when we were growing up.
True.
Yeah, I think a few people owned them. Yeah.
But yeah, so I have seen it a few times since, but yeah, it's one of those films that's quite an easy watch, I guess. So it's one I've definitely gone back to.
Well, put it this way, I remember thinking like when it was recommended on the list, I remember thinking, oh yeah, that's the Jim Carrey film, that'd be a good one. One with Dennis Hopper in as Chris. Oh no, he's not even in this film, is he? It's Ed Harris. For some reason, my brain was thinking it was Dennis Hopper in it. I was like, why did I go there?
Because you've jumped the Nigers trivia gun, and Dennis Hopper was actually cast in this film.
Oh, wow.
Did 2 days of film.
Are you joking?
Left. I'm honest to God, I'm not. Dennis Hopper originally was cast in the Ed Harris role.
No way.
Creator, and then him and Peter Weir, the director, had a falling out. But it was actually written into the contract, apparently, of Dennis Hopper's that either side could kind of mutually walk away from it. And 2 days was all it took. So
that's nuts. That is honestly nuts.
Was actually on set as like himself, creating the creators.
Oh.
It's like, it's time for you to leave now, Dennis. Go make Super Mario 3 years ago.
James Eatock actually played Paul Giamatti's character in the original film. So
with his hangdog look. Yeah, that's nuts. I honestly did not know that bit of trivia. That's so strange, though, because I remember thinking like, Jim Carrey, Dennis Hopper, the lady whose name I forget from Primal Fear, nearly said
Laura
Primal
Linney.
Scream.
After we praised her so much for Primal Fear, you don't even do her the dignity of remembering.
I can't remember anybody's name, Frank. It's just one of those things. Hey, swift like that.
I did. It was clever. And as Nige said, so directed by Peter Weir, who we talked about Peter Weir briefly on Witness episode, one of our very first episodes.
Was that him as well?
And to be fair, Peter Weir has got a ridiculous back catalogue. He does films not that frequently, but when he does, every single film he's made has either been nominated for an Academy Award, a BAFTA, or a Golden Globe, and he's done, I think, about 10 or so. And the ones that I'm most familiar with is Gallipoli with sort of Mel Gibson, obviously Witness, as we mentioned, Mosquito Coast with Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren, Dead Poets, which was obviously a huge hit in the 80s, Green Card with Gerard Depardieu and Andy McDowell, and then obviously Truman Show. And then after that, he did Master and Commander with Fighting Around the World's Russell Crowe, and then The Way Back in 2010 with Colin Farrell, which was also quite enjoyable. So quite a catalogue.
So I just looked up Green Card, because I thought I haven't seen Green Card probably in the longest time. So I clicked on Green Card on Wikipedia. And then I was like, Gerard Depardieu, what was that film? I was thinking of another film he was in. I clicked on his profile. If you look at Gerard Depardieu's Wikipedia profile, there's a photo of young Gerard Depardieu. He looks like Roger Federer. It's scary. I was like, why have they got a picture of Roger Federer in between matches? It's like, oh no, that's a 1976 photo of Gerard Depardieu.
Smith's trivia, actually, in Green Card. Roger Federer was unfortunately not.
It was actually Andy McDowell was Andre Agassi before he lost his hair. So there you go.
That was the prequel to Groundhog Day with Andy McDowell. And I don't know where I'm going with this.
I don't know.
But I want to see it, whatever it is.
Yeah, it sounds like great. It sounds like a great movie.
The prequel to Groundhog Day. I don't know how that would work. Just day.
Day.
It's just a day.
Groundhog Night. Oh yeah, it's like Hollyoaks Late Night.
Wow.
And for this film, I asked James Eatock to give us a little synopsis of what the film is.
The Truman Show follows, quite literally, the life of Truman Burbank, played by Jim Carrey, a man who goes about his happy yet somewhat mundane life, unaware that all those around him, his family, his friends, the populace of his town, are actors. For Truman's life, since birth, has been filmed 24/7 through thousands of hidden cameras and broadcast to a worldwide audience. The show is directed by Christoph, played by Ed Harris, not Dennis Hopper, who orchestrates pretty much every aspect of Truman's scripted life. We join Truman Burbank as he slowly begins to discover that the world around him is not all that it seems. There's your VHS box set description. I should be writing that shit.
It's very good.
I know, I'm quite proud of it.
Did you write that yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Well
yeah.
Coming to you now from the largest studio ever constructed, it's The Truman Show!
Yeah!
Good morning!
Good morning.
Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.
What if? No scripts, no cue cards.
Morning, Spencer. How's it going?
What if you were watched every moment of your life?
How many cameras you got there in that town?
5,000.
I believe Truman is the first child to have been legally adopted by a corporation.
Straight from the off in this film, Jim Carrey, you see that. A light crashes down into this perfect suburban world. And as the audience, you're like, what the hell? But you're in on it as well, straight from the off. You're not trying to figure this out, which is another approach I guess they could have taken with this film. You know that he's in this world because you're seeing the cameras from like inside a cup or in a car. It's all like Big Brother style.
The famous shot is the one from the bathroom mirror, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which is a really great framing device as well, where you can see what they see kind of thing, you know.
I'm not going to make it. You're going to have to go on without me. No way, mister. You're going to the top of this mountain, broken legs and all.
And it's a really nice start to the film, actually, because he's doing that, going through the motions of his day, which is the same every day. It's this kind of rat race that he's in, but also this almost perfect life that he's got. The American dream is what came to mind from myself, is what what life is. It's he's in a marriage, he's relatively happy. They've got, he just goes about this kind of suburban, like very green, beautiful life, much like...
Well, it reminds me of that 1950s... I've said it before on podcasts, where it's that 1950s idealised idea of the American dream, which is, white picket fences, and you even kind of get those shots of someone mowing the lawn and everything's very picturesque and perfect. It's kind of... The life, the world he inhabits is almost like a picture postcard kind of thing. It's not... Well, obviously it's not real, but it's not even by... normal standards, it's not quite real, which is, I guess, what they're going for, what the film's going for to present to us. So we can we always remember that the town looks like a set, because it is, and even the exterior shots, when you see those wide angles, it's like this all feels very structured, and because it is.
Yeah, and you said they're 1950s as well. It's really worth pointing out that they set the world that they have created, Ed Harris, the architect or whatever he's called, the creator, is set in the 1950s. So,
how did I miss that?
So your comparison to 1950s is bang on.
Yeah,
because
it's like out of like a Sears catalogue. It's how it's kind of described.
Yeah.
And like Laura Linney herself, for her character, said she actually went back and looked at a 50s style Sears catalogue to see the sort of poses that people did in those days. Because obviously there's one of the really cool bits about the film and really interesting is obviously it's a TV show, but there still needs to be advertising revenue to help fund it. So quite often the actors around Truman perform a quick little ad, or he gets pushed up next to a billboard with an ad on and stuff like that. And her character especially
is the best.
Quite a lot. I think with like coffee beans. There's one with like some sort of can opener type thing. Yeah, exactly.
The slice and dice thing.
Yeah, the slice and dice.
And it mentions a lawnmower, and then all of a sudden, like later on in the film, he's suddenly using that brand of lawnmower. It's all those kind of little subtle hints. But yeah, it's that perfect sort of 50s life. And I think Ed Harris's character actually kind of says, like, this is the life. This is the perfect American life, really. And it's kind of what that everyone should be aspiring to be in. And we actually get to glimpse the outside world through the eyes of the viewers. And a lot of them are doing kind of like rundown manual labour, sort of manual jobs, working as parking attendants or working in bars or sat in the bath or sat on their sofa. And you kind of think, actually, yeah, this idyllic lifestyle does look quite appealing. You can see why someone would be drawn to do that.
Well, for me, there is no difference between a private life and a public life. My life is my life, is the Truman Show. The Truman Show is a lifestyle. It's a noble life. It is a truly blessed life.
Going back to what Smith said about he's on a set and the light falls out of the sky, one of the things early on they obviously present to us is the world he lives in is so carefully guarded. So when the light drops from the sky, or the object, obviously it is a light, Truman looks at it, looks up at the sky, and he's all confused. And then he's in the car driving on the radio. Yeah. It's like an aircraft part dropped out the sky today, but nobody was hurt. And it's just like that's so kind of brilliant that they're constantly covering up the tracks, and they can. But it's also terrifying because they literally control the narrative of his entire life. Every little it's scripted within an inch of his life, which is so wonderful.
It's so scripted, but also the bizarre thing is with it, which we find out, I guess, a bit later in the film, is that it's all a bit repetitive, like the way the actors do it. So they like first position, they all do this same routine every day. They, like the guy with the dog that he sees when he goes out each morning, and the two like twins that push him up against the board. Everything happens pretty much identically the same each day, which is, I don't know, it's a bit strange in some ways. You'd think they try and variate that a little bit.
But at the same time, I think that might, I haven't read too much about this film over the years, but I think that strikes me as almost like a bit of a social commentary about in life you can fall into the trap of things becoming a routine of wake up, clean your teeth, have a coffee, go to work, do your job, have lunch, come back. And sometimes you're not even, because you're in that, as you say, Smith, the rat race, you're not too aware of your surroundings all the time, so that repetitive nature probably doesn't, it's like us in everyday life. We may walk past the same person whenever we go out, but we don't notice.
I think one of the really cool bits, sort of going back to the radio as well, obviously, like as you said, it sort of deals with the light falling out of the sky. Every time he goes to the newsstand, someone's there with a newspaper, and depending almost from what happened the day previous, the headline will be adapted to try and sort of subliminally influence Truman's character. So when he starts talking about going to Fiji, it's just like terrorism abroad and all these awful things. And it's very clever how they're just so on top of that to try and get into his head and try and influence his decisions. And even when later in the film he goes to like a travel agent, all the posters on the wall are like planes getting struck by lightning. And just
that's one of my favourite.
I love that, and that's in a travel agent as well.
It
could happen to you. It says
it could happen to you. There was I remember that was like one of the, before I'd even seen the movie, that was like one of the publicity shots. Is Jim Carrey sat? It's slightly different than the shot in the film, but it's the photo of the lightning bolt going through the airplane, and he's kind of like looking worried off camera, but it's such a great image. It's kind of very almost iconic to a degree, because I even again when this film was recommended, that's literally one of the first images that pops into my head. Not the end of the movie, not the start of the movie, just that him and the travel agent like looking at the lightning bolt going through the airplane. It's brilliant.
Well, it's kind of horrific in the sense of one of the biggest ways they try to influence him and to try and stop him from leaving the town is quite early in his life. They essentially killed off his father in like a boating accident, sort of at sea, big storm, and he falls in to give sort of Truman's character a phobia really about going into water or traveling over water or anything like that. So that's the kind of level of control. And really, it could have been the sort of film that's actually quite dark. Realistically, this guy's almost in a prison. He's in this place whereby every sort of bit of his life is controlled. The person he meets and falls in love with, like his relationships with other people, his job, it's all kind of meaningless and just for someone else's entertainment.
I don't know. I would kind of argue that the film is at times almost like a black comedy. It is quite, you say it could have been quite dark. Yeah, I think they could have really gone into a very dark place. But I still think it is pretty, I think you do come, well, obviously I think the end of the film takes us to a different place.
Yeah.
But I think throughout the film, I think there is that kind of cloud hanging over, because I think because we're exposed to how controlled his life is, I think we do have that feeling of like, oh man, this is not nice, because we know the truth. It kind of hurts even more, because you're just like, oh, the whole thing. And and I think what surprised me rewatching this was how early on they start messing with the formula. When I forgot, his father turns up quite early on in the film. Like he sees this homeless guy and he's like, huh? And the guy's like, it's just like Dad. And it's basically the actor that played his dad who was who drowned and died, technically
killed off
in the script, as Nige said. He finds a way back into the sex, apparently, like as I guess any actor of any kind of long running series. When he was fired, he was put out by it and thought like, oh, I've been fired. So he makes his way back onto the set and he's not part. And the moment and again, this is where you're like, oh, this world is terrifying. The moment Truman sees him, he's like, Dad, these two people who are just like extras walking around just immediately grab him, the dad, and walk him like almost like security, walk him off away from Truman. Truman's like, Dad? Like really confused. And then everybody kind of subtly does their best to get in his way. So Truman's trying to run after these people, taking his dad away, at least in his eyes, his father. And like a car pulls out, a bicycle gets in his way, all these things. And then he's like banging on the coach and the coach just drives off. It's, really kind of, that's where I think it's just...
But it's also accentuated by the fact that Meryl, Laura Linney, in this film, the fact, like what you're saying about the kind of acting and stuff, she's in it for the long run. She is living this life as an actor with him all day, every day, as his wife. And, she's playing someone else. And that, it took me a while to kind of get my head around that, like not only is he trapped in this world, all these actors, like especially the ones that are close to him, are kind of stuck there as well. Because, I mean, she gets to a point where, she's almost at breaking point pretty much, because Truman, the only one he confides in are two people. It's her and his friend who brings around the beers, and they always send him in like when he's struggling, because he's like
break glass, bring a beer.
He's the safe place. He comes in and he's like, we'll go play golf or whatever. But with her, she doesn't deal with it very well at all. So she's constantly butting away the idea. She's like, no, what are you talking about, Truman? And then she'll do like one of those ridiculous advertising things to the camera, or a little zoom in.
Hi, honey. Look what I got at the checkout. Dishwasher safe.
That's amazing.
Quite early in the film, there's a piece where it's like her doing like almost like a celebrity interview where she says, oh yeah, like this acting job, it's basically my life kind of thing. But it does show that she still has this little bit of life outside. And you think, well, potentially when she goes to work, she comes out and she can do other things, because obviously generally he's not going to be in her workplace for those kind of 7 hours a day. So that could give her an opportunity to, I don't know, do whatever you would do in the real world, I suppose. But I will say, it's quite interesting.
I will say this about her character. I think it's pretty obvious. I don't think it's explicitly stated, but I think it's a given pretty early on, is that it's a job for her. She does not love him in the slightest.
No.
It's, and we learn through flashbacks that even his love life was scripted. Like, as we'll get into that. But he had his eyes on a different person, but because that was not in the script or in the vision of Christoph, the director, that individual was also Sylvia. Like the father fired from the show, Sylvia, and
she tried to also kind of explain to Truman that it was a show. She obviously had that kind of emotional attachment to him, or just thought it was cruel. And I guess this ties back to kind of talking about how it's kind of a dark film. And I agree, there's certainly dark elements, but it never feels sinister.
It's
never. And I think part of that's down to the setting and the way it's shot and everything.
Well, the music's all very twee as well. It's like bling, 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 like throughout the whole film, even when he's like trying to escape the world, and he's clearly going like, what's going on with the driving, and he's kind of going a bit crazy. But the music is the utter contrast to him, and obviously that's because the music we're hearing is I've got a thumbs up from Nige on Zoom.
I don't know where that's come from. That's really weird.
How did you even do that?
I didn't.
Thank you. I know I made a good point there.
I want to do that now.
The music we're hearing is obviously what is being played to the people watching in the film, if that makes sense.
Well, at one point it cuts to the sort of booth, doesn't it? And you can see the sort of orchestra or the music people in there.
But you only get that really late in the film, so you don't know that until like quite near the end.
Right at the start, what's really interesting is, rather than like, oh, here's the credits roll and like this is a Jim Carrey film and a Peter Weir film, the intro is actually for the Truman Show TV show.
So which is brilliant.
And which is really like, that's kind of a huge risk, because the first few minutes of a film is something where you really need to draw your audience in, and it does so by presenting it as the TV show it is. And I think that's kind of a really effective way of getting you kind of on side with the idea, the concept, and to like Truman as a character, really, because in this universe he is absolutely beloved. It's a huge smash hit TV show. Like millions of people watched him being born, and there's kind of a scene that shows the highlights of his life. And when he gets married, it's like a big, almost like festival screen with loads of people watching it. That's how big a deal the Truman Show is in this.
I love the way they use flashbacks just generally in this film, because you see so many flashbacks in this film, so you get a really good idea of
it's really well done
who he is. But it's also it's all done from that point of view, that we're watching it as the person in the bar or the bath or the two security guys. You're watching it from that point of view, so you're seeing little kind of like, do you remember when? And then you see the flashback. It's not like Jim Carrey is sitting there thinking and you see a flashback. It's like someone's just pressed play on an old VT.
Oh, ow! Whoa! Ow! Whoa! Okay. Excuse me.
All right.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm so sorry I fell on you like that.
That's okay.
I've been such a klutz all day.
All right.
Going back to the Sylvia thing, the woman he actually genuinely falls in love with, it's one thing when I was watching the film that I forgot about, in the sense of Sylvia's like, right, follow me, and she takes him to a beach and they have this really lovely scene. So they head off to the beach, but because Sylvia knows the show, she knows how to avoid the cameras. But obviously to Truman, it's like, oh, we're taking this very unique route to the beach. And, her father drives up and puts her in the car and drives off. And you think, oh, right. And she's trying to tell Truman that it's all a show and everything. And that the father takes Sylvia away and says, oh, I forget what he says, but drives her off. And Truman's like stood there.
It's like, she's got mental health issues.
Yeah, it's just something like that.
She kind of goes like this. Yeah.
So he's like at a bit of a loss. And then I think it's shortly after that you see the waitresses in the diner looking, and it's that moment I was just like, oh my god, of course, because we watching the film see that scene happen, but on the TV they didn't see that, obviously. And that sounds silly, because I was thinking like, oh, this is very dramatic, and then she just, like, one of the waitresses, and I think it's there to remind Muppets like me who forgot, the waitress just goes, why didn't he follow Sylvia to Fiji? And it's like, oh, of course, because they were led to believe that this woman went off and that she was like this little mini flame or whatever, or this fling. But the narrative they were fed is that she went off to Fiji and Truman never followed her. And it's just like, oh, right, okay, yeah, I forget that they really do control the narrative within an inch of its life. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love the way that Truman starts to figure out stuff in this film, and it actually happens quite a lot earlier than I remembered. So, like, the light is like pretty much, straight away, and then you have a few other things like that happen, like we've said about like the advertising and stuff like that. But there's so many little clues, and he starts to think that something's up, and he's like, who are you talking to? But I think one of the points where I thought it was one of my favourite scenes is him and Meryl, and he finally like confronts her, and is like, who the hell are you talking to, type thing. And she gets a bit crazy, and she gets the Dicer Greater Peeler out, and he's, what are you gonna do? You're gonna dice me, grate me, peel me, or whatever the line is. And she says, I can't work in these conditions or something.
No, it's the key.
No, somebody help me. Or
no, she just says, do something. And he's like, what? Like, who does what? And he's thinking, like, is she saying
she suddenly breaks character.
Yeah.
Do something!
What'd you say? Who are you talking to?
Nothing. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything.
You said do something.
No, I didn't talk. I wasn't talking to anybody. Truman,
talk to me!
I don't know anything. Please stop.
Stay where you are. Truman? Truman.
Oh, thank God. Oh, thank God. How can anyone expect me to carry on under these conditions? It's unprofessional.
Going back to kind of how the film looks as well, obviously we've kind of mentioned that kind of Sears catalogue kind of style, the 50s. What they do really well, I would say, is they sort of blip between sort of cameras that are hidden on other people. So for instance, like there's one in his ring, the guy who has his dog, there's always one in his dustbin that he constantly holds up. And when they show those cameras, it's almost like it's sort of like a porthole or like a lens that is clearly a lens, and then sometimes it'll just cut to like a wide films lens, but it never feels sort of like it never sort of takes you out of it. It always feels like it's part of the Truman Show, which it does really well. And I'd also say that one of the things the director came out and said afterwards was one of the things he really tried to achieve with the style of how it was being shot was that it was like those old school advertisements, which we've kind of already mentioned, sort of play a prominent part in the film, and that everything was sort of really heavily lit. And the director felt that he wanted to make everyone feel watching this that everything in the Truman Show is for sale, which is actually again part of how they fund it. Like all the houses, all the sort of random sort of utensils, or all the food, everything can be bought on like the Truman Show website. So again, it's
because they don't have ads.
Money making.
They don't have ads that interrupt in the show, so they have ads in the show. Where I think they say that, don't they? Yeah, everything you can see in the show is. I think also the really important thing that we should probably say is this came out in 98. A couple of years later, Big Brother was launched in the year 2000, and reality TV as we know it kind of almost replicated what this film has become. And even nowadays, we're so used to reality TV.
Well, I think there's a difference between, I would say, the reality TV like shows, like obviously the big one is the Kardashians. Different to Big Brother. Big Brother, the obviously it was a German show maybe first, then there was a UK show and American, whatever. That show was, I mean, I don't know if it was directly inspired by Truman, but that was very much the fly on the wall, cameras here,
cameras everywhere.
With reality TV shows these days, like the Kardashians or whatever. Those things aren't hidden like.
No, but it's inspired the genre, I guess. The Big Brother, what came after.
Oh yeah, like Big Brother was utterly inspired, but I think reality shows in the modern sense aren't, because they are scripted television and they're shot like television. There's not like a camera in the ceiling pointing down as there was with Big Brother.
There was kind of like a well-known show in the late 70s and 80s in the States called like Real People, and then if you remember back to kind of the early days of MTV as well, they had The Real World, which was a huge hit at that time, which I think probably is more of the style of Ed TV, which we kind of mentioned earlier. But I think, I definitely think it was just on that cusp of realizing what you could do with just normal people, and people were very keen to just see the mundane and ordinary people's lives. And then obviously reality TV came, and eventually it kind of got cranked to these extremes, like the shows like Survivor, or even just ones where like Love Island, where you put them in unusual situations. The thing about the Truman Show is it's just
he doesn't
his
know
life,
about it.
and it's and it's just the creator has kind of grown up with Truman. He's seen his first step, or him losing his first tooth, or the day he was born, and potentially he's going to see the day that he dies. And it
sounds like you quoted the exact line from the film there. That's
quite possibly, but it is terrifying to kind of think that. And even I think the couple of the other parking attendants say, when sort of Laura Linney's quite suggestive and asks him to come to bed, they're like, oh, they always cut away and stuff like that. You never get to see the good stuff.
I really like that, because that it's kind of, it does answer. If you were sitting there thinking, I wonder what happens if, and then he basically that scene is there forced into the film, but it works because as an audience, we would as a film going audience, we probably would ask that question of like, well, what happens when he has to empty his bowels or something, and it's like, they just cut to music or something else, because nobody wants to see that.
Do you fancy sending us a film to review, or letting us know your thoughts on a film that we have discussed? All of your comments will be read out in our end of season leaderboard episode. Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com, tweet us at offradarpodcast, message us on Facebook. All links and info in the description down below.
Do it! Do it!
say what I like is when they do the modern day interviews and we get Harry Shearer, he of Simpsons.
Of course, yeah.
And it's like I don't know if it's an anniversary or something, I forget, but it's like a celebration of the show.
Well, it's almost his 30th birthday.
It's incredible because that's like what, halfway through the film or something like that. That part.
I think so.
Which,
I mean, like
quite
said,
often you start a film with those little interviews and then you're in, but it actually takes you back out again for another little interview sequence.
But I think it was almost like, because it was such a crazy week as well, and it's almost like Big Brother's Little Brother or one of those shows. And I think something you were going to sort of lead on to, Etok, is the fact that Truman never leaves the screen. He's always up there in like the top corner, even if he's doing something mundane like just drinking a coffee or whatever. He's always on the screen, but it just means you can do other things at the same time, which is what they do really effectively.
But yeah, the like when you see this show that Harry Shearer presents as well, you get a real sense of, that's where they talk about, as Nigel said, like everything in the show is available to buy. But then they do that thing where they zoom out and you see that it's the actual, this huge dome structure is actually on top of, like, just on top of the Hollywood Hills. It's just behind the Hollywood sign, which is so appropriate, but it's terrifying because they say, like, I think they say the same, like it's one of two structures you can see from space, the other being the Great Wall of China. So it's the Great Wall of China and the Truman Show, this huge dome, but it's terrifying because when you pull back, I know this maybe sound melodramatic, maybe not the intention, but it just presents as just like how false and how kind of just
like manufactured
about it. It's just like this huge, and it's like not even the dome's been decorated, it's just this big grey dome on top of the Hollywood sign. But I love the fact that it's that close to the Hollywood sign. It's like just another part of the whole manufactured process. But it is, in those moments where we see the real world, like the guy in the bath who, without even looking, I 100%, this is me like doing another risk take, like I did with Danny John Jules in Little Shop of Horrors. I guarantee the guy in the bath that we keep cutting to is the guy that played Napoleon in Bill and Ted.
Oh wow!
I swear to God, it's the same actor, because I remember the little guy in the Bill and Ted movie who plays Napoleon. He's like very, kind of a bit of a scene stealer. And I see him, and I'm watching this. I was like, that's got to be the Napoleon dude. I didn't check.
Is it, Nigel?
That is an absolutely fantastic shout, but you are absolutely
hey, I got it.
That's amazing. I only watched both of these films.
That's Terry Camilleri. I need to. He's Maltese. I'm doing a Smith. Terry Camilleri. Terry Camilleri.
Terrence Camilleri.
I've said it enough times that Smith can hopefully put one good version.
Yeah.
I guess the thing we haven't spoke about as well, which we might be overlapping slightly with the Jim Carrey episode, but we haven't actually spoken about Jim Carrey in this, as in his acting. Obviously, this was at a time when Jim Carrey was known for Rubber Face and being this kind of The Mask and all of those type of films. So this is his first kind of semi-serious stroke.
Yeah, it was before the Liar Liar, I guess, was before this.
Like extreme Ace Ventura maybe before that. But
you had Ace Ventura, Mask, and then I guess in Liar Liar, and then this one.
So I mean, we have said this, I guess, in the Jim Carrey episode, but but if you've not listened, he was obviously that type of actor, that he was this comedic fool. So like until this point, I don't think I personally took him that seriously as an actor. I just thought he would do the same silly thing over and over again, which was very funny. But in this, it's really interesting because it's a fine line. So you do have the comedy, but you've also got this kind of like sweetness and humbleness and this totally different side to a Jim Carrey comedic role, and like well, you've both said it's that black comedy and that darkness kind of shines through, and especially as we get later in the film with the love interest and when he eventually tries to escape. But yeah, I mean, his performance is great.
Right at the very end of the movie, you get you get that charm and serious actor come through, and it's like, oh, this guy has got real acting chops that probably we haven't really seen up until that point in his career.
I think something to kind of bear in mind, like as you say, I think it was like The Cable Guy and then Liar Liar, as you said, that he kind of delayed making this film for a bit. But Peter Weir, the director, like Jim Carrey was always his first choice. But someone else that was considered for the role, and someone else that comes up quite often in like random bits of trivia, was actually Robin Williams. And he was someone that could have potentially been Truman. And again, like I think he's got that sentimentality and that kind of zaniness. Yeah. But it may have been a bit too much. I mean, it's impossible to say. But Jim Carrey said it was the film that he accepted quicker than any others. And at the time, he was on $20 million for a film and took a substantial pay cut. I think it was like 12 for this, which kind of indicated how much he wanted to go in a different direction to do something that was more drama, that wasn't just sort of rubber-faced man that he had kind of already become known for in those days.
I know this sounds maybe a bit melodramatic, but it's kind of a brave move because he could have just kept doing silly films. I mean, Cable Guy is a slightly darker film anyway, and it's not. He's a larger than life, character in that film, and this is probably, Liar Liar is, it's a comedy, and it's a more of a reserved role, but this is the one where it's like, he's taking that step of, I'm going to try and make people see that I can actually act. And he does a fantastic job. Like it's really unique in the sense of when I'm watching this film, when I was watching this film, I didn't find myself thinking, oh, it's Jim Carrey playing I know that's not the case of every film ever, but sometimes with Jim Carrey or Robin Williams, to bring him into it, or even any actor, sometimes the actor themselves becomes, you're like, oh, it's Al Pacino being Al Pacino in a role or whatever. Yeah. Or Jim Carrey, obviously, it's because he's so known for this, quite rambunctious character.
Don't you want to know how I did that? I'll tell you. They're on a loop. They go around the block. They come back. They go around again. They just go around and around. Round and round.
I invited Rita and Marlon for a barbecue on Sunday. I'm going to make my potato salad, and I need you to remind me that we need more charcoal.
Are you listening to a word I'm saying?
Well, it certainly allowed him to shift in direction and change essentially the tempo of his career, because that kind of era, like you could look at someone like Adam Sandler, and I appreciate that he eventually did do sort of more drama roles. Like he was just silly, goofy man-child for quite a long time. And it's like to get paid that much money and kind of do those roles, it was always an option for him. But it was really brave for him to take on the role. Like this is kind of almost like a slightly art house film, really, fundamentally. If you looked at the script, and the script was one that was kind of thrown around Hollywood a bit, like big money was paid for it. And the writer, actually, we've not really discussed the writer yet, as a chap called Andrew Niccol, who had actually written Gattaca before this, which is a film that I would sort of highly recommend, that again kind of has that almost like sci-fi element. Like you could imagine this is the sort of film that sort of Philip K. Dick might have written. And he did a book that was quite similar in terms of someone almost being kind of like their life manufactured. But it's just, it was definitely a risk for him to take on this role. And even on set, they kind of banned people doing Jim Carrey quotes at him. Like, could you imagine if he's trying to do this serious role and someone's like, somebody stop me, like, every day.
I don't believe it. Father Ted.
It's like Richard Wilson. But like the fact he went to those lengths where it was like nobody can like pull silly faces or say things to him showed how seriously he took it. So
good for him.
So,
I mean, we may as well go into the moment when Truman escapes, which I absolutely love, because the film goes from being a comedy into quite the drama. I think it's got little moments of levity, but you get a real insight to the people running the show, because obviously Christoph is suddenly like, cut to the camera or whatever, and then Jim Carrey has faked that he's still asleep in bed, and Christoph is like, zoom in on that, enhance or whatever, and you see that Jim Carrey's basically built a little almost like setup.
Truman! Surprise party! Whew. Come on, buddy. I got us a 6-pack of cold brewskis with our name on them. Come on, pal. Come on, buddy.
Marlon, find him. He's still on the drone.
wherever you are.
That's good. Keep it light.
But I love the search party that follows, because then you get all these scenes. And one of my favourite moments that I don't think I'd ever
the search party
before.
is all the actors, isn't it?
It's all the actors. But the best bit is the two twin brothers who we'd seen in, like, you know, in this repetitive nature of his life. Like, we're thinking about taking on that was it life insurance policy?
Yeah,
and they're always
like 2 for 1.
Yeah,
twins.
two for 1. They're twins, and they're always really chipper and kind of, you know, very false. And then it cuts to them on the search party. It's the two brothers, and one of them says, you know, "We'll find him," and the other one goes, well, you know, "Find the son of a bitch." And it's just like they're completely different characters, because now these are the real people, and it's like they need to find him, but it's just they're not the chipper twins. They're these they look like two guys that are part of this almost like
mob. It's like a
mob. It is like a mob. That's a very good word.
Okay, well, yeah, no, and Ed Harris is obviously like architecting this whole search party. So he does for the first time, which they've never done. It's night at the time, and yeah, they bring up the lights through the moon, so daylight starts.
Cue the sun.
And then they bring the storm to try and stop him again from escaping.
Which obviously, like one of you guys said earlier about, the fear of water and stuff, the only way to get out of this dome-like prison is to get on a boat and sail. Obviously now his father is, he knows his father's alive, but he still has this fear that he's always had. But yeah, the storm, this is the bit where Ed Harris's character pushes it to the extreme where
what's
it's
great
like,
about
you'll have to kill me or something like that, doesn't he? He says
it's the contrast with like Paul Giamatti, you know, obviously before he became the Paul Giamatti. He's one of the guys that likewise. And he's
like our mate from Wayne's World, in the control booth, isn't he?
Yes,
Fuller? No, Thingy Fuller.
Someone,
we keep talking about.
Kurt Fuller?
Kurt Fuller, yeah. He's in the booth.
And and he controls like certain aspects of the show. And Ed Harris is like barking orders at him, and you can see there's this regret that he doesn't want to do certain things, because he's like, you see he's like, make the storm this, and he's like upping it to, you know, dangerous levels and stuff, and it's really beautifully shot. It's a completely manufactured storm, but it's enough to, you know, tip him over the side, and everybody, you know, everybody around the world, in the real world, is watching this kind of gripped and thinking like, oh my god. But obviously, what you have, and it's hinted at one point when it cuts back to going back to the celebratory show they have about Truman, where it's all behind the scenes. You have Harry Shearer talking. Sylvia, the woman that was like the true love of Truman's life, she phones in and has a conversation, and behind her, and it's really like, it's kind of subtle, but it reminds you of like, oh, they probably would be this if this was a real thing, is you have posters which is like Free Truman. So there's a movement of people that want to expose the real world to him, because they whilst it's entertainment for millions, probably for just as many people, it's horrible entrapment, you know, forced life. This poor guy is in this prison that he's completely unaware of, and it's like there's a world of possibilities if he was just to step outside. So there's this real movement. So there are people watching this storm, and there are people rooting for him to get out, like escape. And the truth is, you know, everyone watching knows it's a dome, but they're like, well, could he feasibly do this? And it leads to the storm happens, and it's kind of like one of those, I think, I don't want to maybe make too big a deal, but I think it is one of those kind of iconic shots, not necessarily in movie history, but definitely of a certain few decades. I think so. Which is the boat kind of slowly going towards, like, you see the sky and the sea, and it's like, oh, beautiful. And then suddenly, as the boat gets closer, the what's the front of a ship called? Oh, the stern,
or the pointy bit.
Yeah. the pointy bit, and it just goes through the side of the dome, like, through this, and it's so beautifully done because it just hits the sky. It's almost like something out of a Roadrunner cartoon, a Wile E. Coyote, when Roadrunner paints like the sky, and then Wile E. Coyote is the one who just runs into this brick wall or whatever, and and he gets off the boat and starts walking, and then Ed Harris, the first time ever. And it's so beautifully directed because it's like God technically it is speaking to him, and it's through, and like Truman looks up and he just sees the sun, and it's just Ed Harris talking to him, and it's just fantastical and beautiful.
Truman, you can speak. I can hear you.
Who are you?
I am the creator of a television show that gives hope and joy and inspiration to millions.
Then who am I?
You're the star.
It's a beautiful ending and a perfect ending to the film. Obviously, he says his line that we've heard him say earlier in the film, which is, in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. And then the music for a second is all like quite positive, and out of nowhere he does this kind of like little bow and just walks out, and then my favourite bit of the show is the two security guards just say, what else is on, and then it finishes.
It just goes to show they end transmission, they're like, what's
and that's
the
it.
channel, look at the TV
but
guy.
It's so easy, like so many films do that extra scene. He then meets Sylvia, and
you saw her run off, and that was all you needed to say.
That's enough, right? And this film, the ending is just right. I feel like so many films go that little bit too far, but it just leaves that what if. How's he going to adapt? Because now not only has he gone out of this prison, he's essentially time travelled into the future because he's so used to the 1950s. A perfect kind of end to the film.
I was going to say, I do love like Christoph trying to persuade him, the kind of, he truly believes he's in the right. He's saying,
definitely.
He expresses just how much, and there's a love for Truman. Like, there's no doubt Christoph, but it is like a possession. It's because Christoph's saying all this very impassioned stuff, and it's also kind of, even that feels directed because everybody's watching, and Christoph's giving this performance of his own. I believe it's coming from a genuine place, but it's also a part of the show. Almost.
One of the lines I like, he says, "I know you better than you know yourself," and Truman says, "You never had a camera in my head." I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, it's just the perfect way to end that movie, I think. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Nige, have you got any trivia for us on this one?
I've got, well, it's interesting. You were talking about the ending and kind of the script and how it works. And we mentioned earlier that it's not necessarily that sinister, and it's dark, but not that dark, because the original script was actually a lot darker, and there were like crucial differences in the sense that the city was not like this utopian society. There was like stage criminal sort of situations going on. Truman himself had a drinking problem in the original script. Wow. And there's like it was very clear that he was sort of in sexual relations with his wife, which we kind of get anyway, but it made more explicit. And the main reason being that Christoph was determined that them to have a child, which would then carry on the show, and that gets kind of hinted at, but maybe not quite as much. But then it was interesting you saying about the ending that it's perfect. It doesn't need sort of his love interest runs down the stairs and that's all you get. In the original one, they ended up on a rooftop with a lot of the members of the cast, but also Christoph there, and Truman ends up attacking him and like strangling him before Sylvia comes along and kind of saves the day.
Sounds like a Marvel movie.
Yes, it's a little bit weird. So I'm kind of glad they didn't go that way. Well, yeah, exactly. But I guess one of the other sort of bits of trivia, we've spoken about sort of how brilliant Jim Carrey is in this film. Originally, like as I said, he signed on to this film very quickly. And one of the things that he felt a lot of compassion for his character, because he felt like it was his own real life relationship with the paparazzi, that everywhere he went, he was being watched and being followed. And it was really interesting as well. Like, we know Jim Carrey is a great improviser. Well, Peter Weir comes from a very kind of British classic acting background. And initially they had a little bit of a falling out on set because Carrey would go off script so often. And then they kind of came to this arrangement because Weir realised how talented and brilliant Carrey was and started encouraging elements of it. And a couple of the bits exist in the film. Most specifically, the scene when he's
got to be the space thing, right?
The space thing in front of the mirror with the soap. He did another one where he gave himself like a dress and curly hair. That obviously didn't make the final cut. But it just goes to show, like, if you give someone enough leeway, they can do something magnificent. And The last sort of little piece of trivia for you is something we don't actually speak about that often in these podcasts, is kind of like the promotional side of these films. Now, you may remember around the time there was a really impressive poster for The Truman Show, which was an image of Jim Carrey's character Truman, but with loads of tiny little images of him within The Truman Show that kind of created this bigger picture. If you've not seen it, I highly recommend you go and check it out. You'll know what I mean when you see it. But that was actually created by an artist and rumoured to cost $75,000 to create this one image. So, but it is very memorable, I would suggest. So, as I said, do go and check it out.
So I kind of like what, I guess we've kind of said what we think generally, but yeah, what we think and our ratings. Ross, who suggested this film for us to watch, so Ross has given this 8 out of 10.
Oh,
okay. Very interesting.
So how does it end? Nige, any talk? Who wants to go first on this one? Who fancies?
Oh, I see. He's called back to the little pin badge she had on her cardigan.
How does it end?
See?
Did you like that?
Clever.
It's so clever, so subtle.
It's very clever.
Well, I'm going to stop this awkward silence and give my rating. So I think for me in The Truman Show, it was one of those films where I think I enjoyed it on my first watch, but I never thought as much about it as a lot of other people. There's people who absolutely rave about it, call it one of its favourites one of their favourite films, I should say. But for me, it was always like, yeah, it was fine. I kind of put it almost in that sort of Forrest Gump category, and this is going to feel like a personal attack on Smith because I know he's a big fan of Forrest Gump, for instance. But yeah, But before I go on a big rant about that, I suppose I should sort of come clean and say I enjoyed it a lot more watching it again this time. I think there's a lot more subtlety about Jim Carrey's character. I think Laura Linney is brilliant in this as well. I think like that kind of the relationship she has with Truman is done so unbelievably well in terms of you can tell there's almost like not quite hate, but certainly a lot of resentment, and it is her just doing her job. And obviously Ed Harris as well, although with that character it was Ed Harris when he was first brought in said, oh, maybe the guy should have like a hunchback or something, and just wanted to take it in a really weird direction. I'm kind of glad they didn't do that.
I was like when actors do that.
Yeah, just like what and I mean in terms of like awards and everything, it got nominated for 3 Oscars. Ed Harris for Best Actor in a Supporting Role as one of those. So again, it was something really, really considered as a top tier film at the time. Saying that, I think for me there's a bit of the film where it kind of lags a little bit for me, maybe about 2/3 of the way through. It loses its way a little bit. I think I do love Peter Weir's style. I do think it's really original, albeit a TV as well, as we mentioned. And it is enjoyable. And it's not too long either. It's not one of these films that's like trying to be epic for the sake of it, but it just doesn't quite get there for me. But saying that, I'm still going to give it a really solid rating. I do heartily recommend people go and watch it if you haven't seen it. I'm actually going to sort of give Ross a high five and say I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10.
Oh,
as
okay.
Well. So
nice.
So, yeah.
I thought you were
going to go on a Nige twist and be like, oh, it's actually a 4. I hate it. No, I still really enjoy it. I think
an 8.
Yeah, it's not quite in that top tier of films, but it's very, very solid.
I thought your rating was a high 5 then. She said, I'm going to give Ross a high 5. And I was like, oh, right, he's just going to go for a 5. Oh, a high 5. Maybe that's a 6. I see what you did there. That was good. Yeah, I guess I'm kind of in the same boat as Nige. The same boat. We're trying to get off the.
And I'm going to sink you guys.
You're going to sink us, Smith? Why are you going to do that?
You godlike crazy person.
I get the feeling
I am the god
your rating is not going to. Yeah. Oh my God, Smith's got a god complex. Smith's gone to the bad place. So yeah, I'm kind of in the same. I keep saying the same boat as Nige. I've got to get out of the boat.
Get out of my boat. It's mine.
Sorry, Nige. So yeah, I saw this, like I say, in 2004, 2005, something like that, and I thought, oh, it's a good film. I'd say, like Nigel, I appreciate it more on this viewing. I always know it's a good movie. I know why people rate so highly. I think if you saw it in '99, I think it's a bigger deal than if someone was to see it for the first time now. Because I think, as we've talked about, that reality, Big Brother kind of thing does seem a bit... Yeah, you know, if someone did like a Truman Show film now, you'd be like, okay, you know, it'd have to be a really good film. But in 99, I guess this was... Sorry, 98, 99, this was kind of a real big deal. And I think if you saw it first time round, I think you'd have maybe a stronger connection to it than, someone like me who saw it in 2004, 2005. But it's hard to find fault with this film. It really is. It's got a fantastic cast. The pace is really good. I love the fact that, the world starts to, even as early as the light dropping out the sky and the dad reappearing, and there's that imbalance is, they don't wait until 45 minutes into the film to start messing with the serenity of his life. It was like we're already seeing things falling apart.
Sorry, you made me think of something I should have said in my review. I guess that's part of the problems that I have with it, is it happens so quickly in the film. You think, well, how could it have gone 30 years without him having kind of picked up stuff on this? Like, that's, I know it's not supposed to be that believable a film anyway, but it does really stretch that aspect for me. And I guess that's one of the things that just left me feeling a tiny bit uneasy.
That's a really good point. Yeah, that is something I think I've considered it before, but like you say, I guess it's one of those things like any film, when you jump in sometimes to someone's life in a film and the events happen then, it's like, well, why are they happening now? Why didn't they happen all that time before? But I understand what you're saying, especially with something as scripted as with the narrative of Truman's life. You think, well, why is it taking so long for him to just start to notice the repetitive nature of it all? And I think, like I say, I think that's what I said earlier on. I think they really try and drill home the fact that his life is so mundane that he doesn't pick up on these things. It's a great cast. Like we've all kind of praised Jim Carrey, Linney and Ed Harris. A lot of the supporting cast are really good as well. I love his best friend, who's kind of one of the kind of worst characters in it, really, because he really does to pretend to be on his side, and yet he's the one that constantly shoots down his dreams. It's kind of really, shocking when you say that. But it's really hard to find fault with this film, and yet it wouldn't be in my top 10 or top 20 films of all time or anything like that. There's something missing on about this film, and I can't quite put my finger on it. That's frustrating, because it's like, what kind of person is reviewing a film and says, I don't know what's wrong with it, it's just something that doesn't work for me? But I'm going to give it this was a very lengthy way of saying an 8 out of 10.
Nice.
See, it's weird that we feel like we need to justify an 8 when an 8's
I was going to say,
score.
Is it?
But why is it not?
Why is it not a 9 or 10? Yeah.
I don't quite. That's the frustrating thing.
No, it's a fair point. Yeah.
Go on, Smith.
It's a weird one with this film. So
wait, are you in the boat with me and Nige? Are you in the boat?
I might be in the boat.
Okay,
but
man, there's not enough room. We've only got one life jacket. This isn't going to work.
I'll be in the little lifeboat at the back with his dad and Ross. So anyway, that metaphor is done now.
Thanks for killing it, Smith.
The slightly weird thing is, I like I said, I saw this like roughly around that time, and I remember really enjoying it. But like you guys, I didn't pick up on many of the subtleties, and I just thought it was a really nice film. And I think I've always kind of gone back to this film almost as a bit of a comfort film, a bit of nostalgia, and something that I just genuinely could watch in another year, because it's just very, very watchable. But I do feel like there is more to it, and on this watch, that darkness and like basically what we've kind of said throughout the podcast, I feel like I picked up so much more when you kind of look at it in a different sense. And I think, like you both have said, it doesn't do a lot wrong. I do agree with what you're saying. The build up is very quick, so there you don't get his life without any drama to begin with, but then would it just meander and be a bit too slow if we're just seeing it, in Groundhog Day, for instance, we see it pretty quickly and then all of a sudden it's bang, bang, bang. And I feel like it's kind of similar with this. You need to be seeing him kind of seeing stuff going wrong, because you need stuff to happen. I love the love story because it's not rammed in your face, and so many of these kind of twee 90s films, they do ram it in your face, and it's not at all. They barely have any time on screen together, which is so clever and again subtle. I think that's the word in this film. And it's one of my favourite Jim Carrey performances probably ever. There's a cut.
Surely Spotless.
One of.
It's up there. It's up there. It's one of three.
Yeah. It's one of three. One of the three that we love. But I kind of land at the same mark as all three of you guys, Ross, Nige and Etok, and go with an 8. I think maybe it would have been like a few years ago, a 9, but I have also seen this film so many times, so I don't know if that has affected the score a bit, you know, sometimes when you've seen a film so many times. But yeah, I really enjoyed it.
I think one of the key points of this, and something we haven't actually touched on, is the fact, I think in all of us, I think in human nature, we all kind of feel like we're the stars of our own lives kind of thing. Obviously, it's very hard not to see things from your own perspective sometimes. And I think this film does it's just a really great way of showing that, I guess. And that's kind of how you can relate to Truman. And there have actually been sort of mental health conditions diagnosed based on people who think they are in a big TV show.
That's true, yeah.
That paranoid level. And it's really interesting as well. Like when Jim Carrey and Ed Harris made this film, they never even actually met. So Jim Carrey never met was God. They were completely separate. So there you go. But yeah, I'd be really interested to hear what our viewers think.
Our viewers and also our listeners.
Our viewers? Whoops, yeah, sorry.
That's
I'd be really interested to hear what our listeners
think. Off-radar show. Guys, get in touch. Let us know what you think.
What do you mean? You haven't got cameras all around you?
They're just in your house.
Just one in my nipple.
Yeah, we've put them in your house. Guys, what do you think of the Truman Show? Email us on offradarpod@gmail.com. Tweet us at offradarpodcast. And give us a film to watch in the future. We need your help. We are looking to grow Off Radar and release more and more high quality content. Please give us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your pod. And why not share with your friends and loved ones?
Help me help you.